So this is a Prezi. This is the successor to Microsoft. This allows you to look at a whole presentation and bounce around in it and magnify it. And this was something I did for the 2015 San Diego Constellation Conference. We're not going to do all this. I'm just going to show you some parts of it. But this is an example of the kinds of teaching tools that I build and care about. So this particular presentation covered, I'm sorry, you can't see some things here. Are you guys seeing this? You're seeing this line of people. You're seeing us too, right? I need to collapse that. Wait a minute. There we go. Okay. Wait a minute. All right. So what are home altar constellations? Where do they come from? Here's some of the how-tos. Here's some of the benefits, what they're good for. And we popped over here. This is a poster. This was a poster for the 2013 Seattle conference, which has 3 different constellations in it. And I want to take you back to what are they? So here's a definition of the core form. And the core form has a lot of different offshoots. So different parts of this can be true or not true. In the core form, they're solitary do-it-yourself constellations that use ordinary household object as reps. You'll hear Izzy and I calling them object persons. And again, that's this animistic worldview. When I was trained as a shaman, I was told I did not have medicine tools. I had medicine helpers. And that was a big difference. That I was to relate to those, whatever it was, a rattle, as a being, an entity, and I was to personify it and regard it as a helper, and not something that I controlled as such, but rather something which, if I maintained a good relationship with it, would be very, very helpful to me. These happen via regular visits on some dedicated altar surface over days or weeks or one session. I'm not going to do, they come from constellation work. These were the first sorts of things that I did them with. And then there were these sets of figurines that you could buy. But people, and then there's sand tray therapy, and home altar constellations are just sand tray, and they're typically ancestrally focused, though not necessarily. They're tabletop constellations without the sand that use not so much sets of figures, though you can use sets of figures, but just things from the household. If I look around here, I could grab a cheese grater and it could be my dad, and I could grab the dish soap dispenser and it could be my mother. And can you already see the potential symbolisms here? I hope so, because they're pretty loud. But people at home don't have specialized figurines. And again, as I said, I was taught, I was used to having altars on which there were little beings, and thinking of them and relating to them as little beings. So the idea that I could do that, as I was learning constellations, that I could do that instead of having people as representatives, or the little footprints or figurines that I inherited, it just came naturally. And then I already told you about the first one that I did, where the lady had the whole thing about the cats, and the cat was helping. And that's also what I mean about widening your field. When a spider walks across a constellation, hello, I am paying attention. You understand me? And your familiarity with different symbols it's not something you have to get from a book. The symbolisms of most objects, you can unpack them just from the natural characteristics of those objects, and we'll spend a lot of time doing that. And as you do that, you get better at unpacking the symbolisms of a person's breathing or a person's posture or a person's clothing. When I was getting trained, I had 14 different trainers over about 4.5 years in constellation work. And I realized if I wore black, if I had a black shirt and black pants, I'd get picked and being male and being tall, I'd get picked as a perpetrator more often than if I wore other kinds of clothes. This is do-it-yourself stuff, and I've been able to, bring energy psychology into it. So that said, we go back over here to this, and now instead of that definition down there at the bottom, there's the core definition. And here's the variations. So what? Reps are ordinary household object persons, and we're calling them object people. That's a kind of, my native teachers would talk about the stone people and plant people and the insect people and the two-legged people. And that's an honorific. It means that these are beings of some level of consciousness, worthy of respect. My teachers would say they all have spirits. Where do they happen? They happen on some dedicated altar. You see, I must have 80, 90 pictures of altars like this. The backgrounds of altars get involved at times. Sometimes elaborate backgrounds become part of the picture. What you're seeing here are pictures where, I'm not going to try to make them bigger, but essentially these are labeled. This is the low-tech way of labeling it so that other people can help you with the constellation. As you label these things, you take a picture of it, you send it in to we use a private secret Facebook group to post these on, and or you send them to me or Sandy, my administrative assistant. But when I'm doing remote constellations, I use the floor a lot because I like for both myself and the client to be able to walk around in the constellation, literally to be in it, to stand in the position of dad or someone. I do these myself down in a finished basement where I have a lot of space and a lot of shelves full of things. And I've had people, I tell them they can use the whole room. I had a Russian helicopter pilot who put the symbol for himself up on a sconce. A sconce is a light fixture that extends out of the wall. He put himself up on top of a sconce practically near the ceiling. And that was his view of life. He was holding himself way, way above all the messy stuff of his family. I had a woman from Venezuela, and she started out being a great a slice of a cypress tree that I have hanging on the wall down there. And at some point in the months, it's really years that I've worked with her off and on, but at some point she came down off the wall. It was a big deal. When the basic form here is iterative. The idea is, yes, this can happen in one session, but the core form involves going away and coming back. And how much and how often, you'll get in great detail what that means. And I've already kind of outlined it in what I said to Anne. And then who's doing it? Well, we're doing it, your client, you can do these alone, on yourself or your family, or you can do them with a facilitator. Or with the help of a class like this. And we're using essentially in chapter 2 of Health, Happiness, and Family Constellations, I've broken out the stages, techniques, and creative tensions of kind of classic family constellations. I don't know anyone else who's done that. I've done that because I'm a former cognitive scientist, and that's the kind of thing that we like to do. is to figure out, you know, what are people doing? Can I name the things that people are doing here? And there's nine things that cover most of what I saw everybody doing in terms of the facilitators I trained with, and most of what I do. And again, these are like the training wheels. They're not supposed to limit you. They're supposed to be there for you when you need them. And all it turns out, all we do for these tabletop constellations is just take these same things and shift their context a little bit, and they work just fine for this kind of constellation. Here's a picture of a this is one of the first ones I ever did. We'll look at this in some detail. This is basically a large inheritance was given to a client by her grandmother, who loves the client but hates the client's mother. Then the inheritance was stolen by the mom and the stepfather. There's a wealth of information in these household objects. So this is sort of a general look at how the classes go in terms of what I talk to you about. And it's general because you can see I'm following your lead. You bring up something and I'll have a discourse about that. And so things will not necessarily all happen in this order, but essentially the first class, there's two things going on here. This is the topics that I will, if I was to talk about them all in order, they would be like this. The first part of it is just, you know, this whole business of embracing the wider field, starting to look at the world around you as alive, conscious, basically waiting for you to open up to its love, to it dancing with you. I was taught that the world was in love with me and wanted to dance with me and wanted to talk to me, and that I was the one who wasn't letting it because I had no respect for it. I thought it was dead. I thought when my eye was attracted by some stone when I was walking around, or there's some feather laying there, I had no respect for that. I had no notion that that was possibly the world trying to help me. That the divine energy was flowing something into that and guiding my perception to that, because that feather could be useful and helpful to me. So I'll be talking about that. But then what you don't see here is you're going to get, you have a homework. You have one web page on my website, which is all your homework. It's got videos of all of the classes. It's got the study questions. It's got what I'd like you to read and what I'd like you to do. You can choose to keep up with this stuff or not. It's like there's no grades or anything. So by this, let me use this. By the time we get into the third class, so that's like 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, my hope is that everybody has an altar set up, they've cleansed it, they've chosen something that they're going to work on that's got to do with themselves or their family, that's not too crazy intense and it's not trivial either, and that they've got an altar rolling. We have this private secret Facebook group where you are encouraged to post pictures of your stuff. You will then get people, you'll have pictures in a thread, and you'll have people responding to you. In the meantime, I'm continuing to move through the stages of how one of these things unfolds. But some people have finished a first constellation by here. I hope you can see the cursor, right? And are starting another one. It's up to you. It depends on what's happening and how deep it goes. The Facebook group is private and secret, which means nobody can search it, nobody can see it but us. And then I leave it up there well, I'm just about to delete the last class's stuff because we're starting the next class. So it's still there. It's about to go away now. I encourage all of you to, you know, you need to friend me on Facebook, and I invite you into this group. There's about 8 or 9 people already registered. I expect a few more. And that's a good group. I mean, 12, 15, that's about what we can manage without, because this is a very hands-on class for everybody. If you really get into it, and I promise you, if you get into it, you will learn like crazy. Any questions while I leave this up here, or let me come back. So the you know, there's one homework page. All your videos are there. Your study questions are there. Your readings are there. There's some videos, other videos to watch. If you want a certificate of completion, you can have one if you fulfill certain criteria, which are spelled out. You got to make 5 or 6 of the live classes, or make some arrangement if you can't, and you need to get a constellation done. You need to do the study questions and things like this. The study questions are there for your, you know, to help you, essentially. You will get to read the sections of health, happiness, and family constellations that have to do with this, but I encourage you just to get the book, frankly. You'll get a PDF of everything you need, and there's some other articles that are not in the book that you'll get. But you can get the book, you know, on Kindle or whatever it's called, Nook, the Barnes and Noble thing, or the paperback. And if you're in the class, this is a good thing to have. If you're trying to build a practice, frankly, this is a perspective that does a lot of the practical nuts and bolts stuff and deals with the spiritual and emotional aspects as well. I talk about inreach as well as outreach. A lot of entrepreneurs get swamped in outreach. Their self-care goes down the tubes, their ability to, do you understand me? When you are working in a space of being under the gun all the time, afraid, under pressure, you're not putting good energy out, right? So there's an inreach that needs to go on. There's a chapter on using affirmations and things like that. My question to you at this point is, what would you like to hear from me at this point? What would you like to get out of this experience if you decide to choose to be in it? Nice.
What I would like to get out of it is, I guess, more skills in doing alter constellations, which I would see would give me an opportunity to probably do more remote constellations and not have to have people come to a physical place. Something that would expand my facilitation skills in the work I'm doing inside prison, although I know that I won't be doing any of that inside, but it still gives me the opportunity to expand my own horizons. That's probably in a nutshell where it's at, and learn some of the intricacies of doing alter constellations. I mean, I've been exposed to it, but I haven't really actively incorporated it into my life on a regular basis. So I guess I could see this as a way to kick me off the starting line.
That's a perfect fit. Let me see if anybody else wants to say anything, and then I'll...
Gee, I've been trying to give up being perfect.
I mean, that is precisely what this class is about. Do you want to say, Izzy, why don't you respond to that a little bit?
Yeah, that feels like a perfect fit too. I actually already messaged Randy about that. And look, this is probably the fourth time I will have done this class, and I like to come apart from just energetically to support this class. I always learn something, you know, any teacher also always learns from his students. Michael will say that too. And there's always, each class is never the same because different issues are brought up by different people. So I learn something every time about, you know, something I might not have thought about before, in a way to address a certain issue or a symbolism I might not have seen in objects. And actually, quite frankly, I just really love doing Michael's classes. I enjoy them. They're stimulating and they're fun and so educational always. And the metaphors Michael uses, I always find just so useful as well in explaining things to clients. And yeah, I just get so much out of these. So I know everyone here will.
Thanks, Susie. Anybody else want to talk about what they're here for?
I'm very curious about the timing, because a friend of mine did even this altar constellation with me, but that was always like in one session, like for an hour, something like that. And I think it's really interesting. So to my understanding is we are doing this, yeah, and then the next session we continue that constellation. And I think, yeah, and I'm curious what will, when do we stop and when do we continue, and just simply how that will work and how different, how it will change, you know, the time that you give it to evolve. So I'm very curious about that.
Thank you. I mean, that's a big, important aspect of this. This is an I mean, there's sort of a core home altar constellation, which I'll talk about in just a second, but it has a lot of variants. So you can do a tabletop constellation in one session using household objects, which I'm going to tell you way are better than figurines or at least the little stylized figurines or markers or footprints, because they're just symbolically, they're so rich. You'll see that just instantly. But the core form here is an iterative process. You set up an altar, it grows over time, you're visiting it, you're performing little visitations on it. I have very nice explicit guidelines for how to visit, how often, depends on what your life is like. You want to visit it often enough that it doesn't go stale on you, but you don't want to visit it so often that you're pushing it. All right. And for some people that have really busy lives, that might be they visit it once every 2 days. For other people, they might do a constellation in 12 visits over 2 days. But you're going away and you're coming back. And you're doing that on purpose to give the field a chance to form in your subconscious, your intuition to work, what I call slow intuition to develop. I think this is hugely valuable, even in terms of doing workshops or being, you know, if you're in that, there's no time pressure here. We remove group management pressures, we remove time management pressures, and if you're practicing on your own, we remove client pressures. Suddenly you are free to develop some core skills of constellation facilitation that don't necessarily develop that easily with all that other pressure. The first lady that I studied with, Andrea Largent Bosbach-Largent, who was trained by Angela Merkel, came out of Germany. She spent she had a 3-year training, which I did not take all of, but she spent a whole year training people just in group management, which is, so this iterative aspect is very important. Just getting rid of all those 3 pressures is a big deal. You can do this with a client in 1 session, or you can have a client that's sitting and having an altar built that goes over 5 weeks, and you're catching up every week. And the client is simply taking pictures and sending. Everybody can take pictures these days, and once you get people to take them from about a 45-degree angle, so you can see both, you know, the arrangement and the size of the objects, you can follow what they're doing. This also gets your client involved in the process in a way that can be very lovely. Indeed, it can get your client's pets involved in the constellations. The first one of these that I ever did, this lady had a whole thing about rescuing cats because she abandoned a cat at one point when she had to flee from an abusive boyfriend. She had a lot of guilt around that cat that was related to stuff in her family system. And she had 5 cats, and one of the cats was busy moving things around on the altar. And that's another thing that I want to help you do, is to widen your field. All right? Your life is a constellation. It can be read that way. Almost everything that happens involves deeper symbolisms if you have the time and the awareness to track them, to watch them. A lot of my shamanic training was involved with just watching normal stuff that happens, only I'm looking at what people would think of as coincidences or meaningless or whatever, and I'm reading them. And I'll tell you another metaphor. We take all these symbols. They're like flowers. We pick a symbol. It's a meaning, the potential meaning of something. We put it in a basket and we just let it sit there, and we see if we collect other ones that fit it or not. We don't get stuck on one of them. You understand me? We use what I call the butterfly method. We waltz around and we're picking up symbols, and we're getting a broad, soft, focused view of a lot of things, and the bouquets start to come together. When the bouquets start to come together, certain flowers stay, other flowers get discarded. So there's a branching and a pruning that goes on. So thank you for that question, because that, again, that started me off on a whole route.